to cook. If it's a good year, I'll be pretty much self-sufficient in vegetables throughout the summer. But, you know, that means as long as you're happy to make use of what you've got. Mm-hmm. And, you know, for me, that is one of the huge, you know, I'm really interested in cooking and really interested in learning more about what's in season and making use of it. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'm very, very happy to eat the courgettes. I don't get bored with eating courgettes. Yeah. If you wanted to have more variety, then, you know, you might need to go to the shops and supplement it a bit. But if you're happy with making use of what you've got, I reckon you could probably do it. Yeah, I think so. I mean, my neighbour, who is an incredibly diligent, very, very skillful vegetable gardener, she does actually now have 2 plots, but for a long time only had 1. And yeah, I mean, she wouldn't buy vegetables, certainly not through the spring and the summer and into the autumn.
That is impressive.
So it's possible, but it takes work.
Yeah, you have to be diligent.
Yes.
Yeah. So what... Talking about courgettes, obviously that is one of the common ones.
Yeah.
That everyone has a glut of.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other things that you think you start the year off and you think, oh, I'll plant, you know, I'll sow the whole packet of seeds of those, and then they have a good germination rate, then you plant the plants, and then you end up thinking, I wish I'd only put in about 3 plants.
I suppose runner beans are the classic example, aren't they? I actually don't grow them, which I know is really controversial, a bit of a confession from an allotment here, but I actually don't like them very much. I find them quite... I prefer French beans. Runner beans I just find a bit sort of coarse and stringy. Actually, it's probably unfair, but I think I've got bad associations with... I ate a lot of them boiled to a slush when I was a kid, and that kind of really put me off. But, you know, another reason not to grow them for me is that everyone else does, and they always have a glut, and people are always giving them away. So kind of why bother to do it yourself, really? I mean, courgettes, I guess, they're almost like a kind of joke vegetable in that regard, aren't they? That you just can't stop.
Bring on the marrow.
Yeah, exactly. But you can always let them grow into marrows, and you can always give them away. Rhubarb actually is another thing. I've got more rhubarb than I know what to do with.
Wow.
So
you can always drop it off that. It's never a problem.
Do you know, it went to seed incredibly quickly this year, though. I turned my back on it, and we had a warm spell in May or whatever, and the next time I looked, it had thrown up some massive flower spike that's about 5 feet tall. And that was it for the year. Yeah. So
it did in one of my gardens, but in my other one where my client is very, very good at watering, it's still going.
There you are.
Yeah. So that's obviously the key. So what are the most time-consuming or difficult crops that you've grown, and were they worth it? Because I can think of 2 examples, but go on, I'm going to let you go first.
For me, things that I have tried to grow... So I no longer try to grow anything that is time consuming and difficult. No, I've got a full-time job, and I've got other things that I need to do in my leisure time as well. And I have learned to be realistic, both in terms of what I can put into the allotment and in terms of what I expect to get out of it. In the past, when I was younger and more enthusiastic and believed what they say in the seed catalogues, I've tried sowing things or tried growing things such as sweet corn. I've tried growing cauliflowers. I will never complain about the price of cauliflower again. They are so difficult. Actually, even things like cabbages, I find quite difficult because they need a really, really long time. They need a lot of protection and they need a long time in the ground as well in order to really, bulk up and form a proper heart. And the longer something is in the ground, the more can go wrong. The more it can fall victim to slugs or birds or diseases or whatever. So I just, the answer to your question is, if it's difficult and time consuming, don't grow it anymore.
No. I mean, I think this follows on from something you said earlier, but I think the key to it is you have to grow what you want to eat. I mean, we were great. I worked in a vegetable garden, and we used to get the seed catalogues out, and we'd be sitting there in the freezing cold tea room going, oh my God, that sounds amazing. Oh, let's try that. And we ended up with all sorts of stupid things that were horrible to eat and were a faff to grow.
Yeah.
And actually, I think two of my biggest disappointments were asparagus peas, which they raved about in the catalogue, and it's like chewing on a bit of rope from an old boat. It is disgusting. And cucumber melons, have you ever come across those?
No, I haven't.
Well, again, they were another bit of a fad, and they look lovely. They're like little tiny jewels. You'd like to be able to string them on a necklace,
right?
But to eat, they're inedible, and I don't care if anyone says that they are. They're
so
just
what are you supposed to do with them?
I think
are
you're supposed to be able to eat.
Vegetable,
they are like a cross between the two.
A cucumber and a melon.
You are supposed to be able to eat them,
right?
But you wouldn't unless you were starving. I don't imagine you would eat them. So yeah, it's very easy to get carried away, isn't it, with the catalogues? Yeah.
Although actually, just your mentioning of asparagus peas makes me think about two things. One, I grew something this year called garnish peas. Have you ever come across those? And the idea is that that you can eat the whole lot. So you can eat the peas, you eat the peas in the pod, and you can eat the flowers, and you can eat the pea shoots. I mean, I kind of question that really, because I would say that actually you can do that with ordinary peas too. It's nothing special, but anyway, that's how they're marketed. But actually I found, again, it may not be a fair comment because it has been so dry. And I found it really difficult to water as much as I should, but they were, they were tough. After I'd chewed one pod for about 15 minutes, extracted all the flavour from it, I gave up. But one thing that does take up an enormous amount of space and an enormous amount of time, although it pretty much looks after itself, is asparagus. And I'm actually really glad that I've got a bed of asparagus on my plot. It's a bit of a disaster area. Not all of the crowns took. And of course, it takes like 5 years before you find that out, which is really frustrating. But the half dozen or so that do produce a few spears for me every year, it's just such a treat.
Yeah.
I know it's not efficient use of space, but it's a miracle. Yeah. It's amazing.
It is. Yeah. I really love it. That's a lovely thing to grow. So you've got your asparagus and you've got your rhubarb. Are there any other things in terms of perennial?
Yeah. One thing I really like to have is globe artichokes. Although we're on clay soil and it can be a bit tricky to stop them rotting. I had some very old plants and I cleared those out and took cuttings, they're called slips, from them and replanted those, and one of them made it and is beautiful and the other one didn't, so that's something I'm going to replant next spring. But they're gorgeous. I mean, the foliage is wonderful. Every part of them is so beautiful, the foliage, the buds, and then if you leave them and they turn into flowers, they're fabulous too.
And the bees like them, don't they?
And actually another one, and actually this is an example of something that's just seeded itself around. It's certainly not growing in the place where I originally put it, and actually I remember it being a complete failure when I put it in one of the beds. I've got a couple of amazing clumps of sorrel.
Wow.
Yeah, they've decided to grow in the path.
I've seen that. I've had those seeds around
actually along with a whole load of alpine strawberries.
Lovely.
So, yeah. I mean, there have been times this year where I felt like the paths of my plot are more productive than the actual beds.
Well, that's because you're not trying to do anything with them.
Yeah, exactly. Things are always best when they're not mucked around with, right?
Yeah, that is generally the truism in all gardening. So apart from the garnish peas, was there anything that you did try this year that was novel, or are you thinking of doing anything new next year?
No, I would say probably not. I am a bit of a creature of habit but again, I think that is about knowing what is worth putting your time into and what's going to give you a reward. I mean, one thing that I have done this year that's a little bit different, probably slightly aside from the allotment itself, is to grow more stuff in containers. And I've been inspired to do that because of another project that I'm working on. And actually I found that to be very successful and productive thing too. So I've got courgettes, I've got squashes. Thanks to the sunshine, I've even got a couple of aubergine plants.
Wow.
I haven't got any aubergines on them yet, but they've got flowers, which is something. And I've been growing a lot of salads in containers as well. But I mean, that is also a technique that you can usefully import to the allotment, because it's a great way of creating a bit more space for yourself. You know, there have been times when I have, for example, used the bags that you can plant potatoes into and just stuck a couple of those on the paths when I've run out of space to actually grow things in the beds. So
where do you start your seeds off if you are kind of growing in containers or even in the ground? Do you start them off in situ, your seeds?
I do. It depends slightly on how much time I've got. I get better results from the things that I start off at home under glass. So either in a pot on the windowsill, or I'm lucky enough to have a small sort of glass house. It's not a greenhouse, but a little sort of wooden framed glass house thing on a patio. So I'll start things off in there. But of course, you have then got to prick those seedlings out, by which I mean take the small seedlings and put them into like a plug tray so that it can grow and become a plant that's then big enough to go into the ground. So that in itself is quite a time-consuming process. But of course, it means that you're then putting a sturdier plant into the ground. So it has got a much better chance of surviving whatever the allotment throws at it, whether that's slugs or lack of rain or whatever. With seeds, it's amazing when it works, but because it's just so simple, you spend, 2 minutes sowing a row of whatever, you water it and you go back and they've come up and you think, gosh, this is a miracle. But I find that it's very, very hit and miss sowing direct. So ideally, I'd start things off at home, get them ready to plant out. In practice, I do a bit of a mixture. So I'll sow direct just on the off chance that it works, but I'll also sow some back at home just as sort of belt and braces.
Yeah, that's what my approach would be. I can propagate things from cuttings like there's no tomorrow, but seeds, I think I've got a curse on me. I can't get them to germinate at all.
Other way round. Can't do all cuttings die, even the ones where people say, oh, that's so easy. No, they're not.
Oh well, you can't be good at everything. So what if you're pushed for time on your plot and you are literally sort of popping up there, after work? When it's all up and running and in full production, what do you think are the kind of best jobs to do if you can only do, say, one thing when you get there?
Watering.
Yeah.
It has to be watering. I mean, this year, there's absolutely no question that that's the thing that you've got to do. In other years, when we have a more normal amount of rain, obviously, if we've had a deluge earlier in the day, I wouldn't waste my time watering. I'd do a bit of weeding instead. But yeah, I mean, I would say in order, watering's the most important and then weeding has got to come second. I try at the moment to force myself to at least do 5 minutes of weeding when I go and grab a few things out. But watering is undoubtedly number one.
Yeah, and I think maybe another thing that people sort of forget is that even if you're not going to use the veg or flowers or whatever's coming up, you do need to pick them, don't you? Because if everything goes to seed, then the thing dies. So...
Absolutely. And I think you you're going to ask me, aren't you, what's my one piece of advice? And I think I've already given it, but actually it is to flipping pick the stuff. And it sounds so obvious, but it's really, really difficult to make yourself do it. And you're absolutely right. You need to keep doing it. So with certain crops, such as French beans and peas, you actually need to keep picking them to keep them productive. With other things, I suppose actually that's true of the leafy greens as well, isn't it? Things like chard and spinach and things like that. You've got to keep picking those leaves to encourage the plant to then produce more leaves rather than